Hey you guys, welcome back to my channel. If you read the title of this video, then you do know now that I am pregnant. When I'm filming this today, I am 16 weeks. I probably won't post this for a little while, so I might be around 17 weeks when you see this video. But I'm currently 16 weeks pregnant, well into the second trimester, so I wanted to start sharing the news with everyone, and I wanted to make a video to talk through everything that's currently going on, maybe some of my symptoms, some things I'm concerned about. I do have a history of pregnancy complications, so one of the reasons why I like making YouTube videos about my pregnancies is to help other people if they're going through a similar situation. We all get really nervous when we're pregnant and anything goes slightly wrong, and you go to YouTube when you try to find other people in similar situations. So I like to share my experiences, but I also share it for myself so I can look back. I'm not going to remember all the details in the next pregnancy, so I like to document everything for myself. And I have done that my past 2 pregnancies, so I wanted to do it again this time. We did do blood work at around 12 weeks to figure out the gender. So I do have a clip of just my husband and my kids and I together finding out what the gender is. So I wanted to insert that now so you guys know we can all be on the same page.
I'm so excited! Yeah!
You ready?
You guys ready?
But she did tell me that we are at no high risk for anything. Like everything looked fine for genetics. Like there was nothing alarming.
Okay.
So that's good.
Yeah,
like it was
good.
like uneventful, so that's what you want to keep.
Yeah.
All right, ready?
It's a girl!
It's a girl! It's a girl! Julie! You were right!
Yeah.
Jill said it's a girl. Mom. She said it multiple times today. She's like, we don't need to worry. It's a girl. Mom. I don't know what that means.
Fetal fraction.
So what name am I gonna name it?
We'll have to figure out a name.
Yeah. I didn't have any name.
No name?
Yeah.
Hey, Dean, it's okay. We're still the cool boys.
How about we name it?
I don't believe it.
That was so much fun, and it was cool that we have a little bit older kids now so they can kind of understand what's going on. Definitely my son. I feel like my daughter understands pretty well though too what's happening, and she was really excited that she's gonna have a sister, so that was really fun and really cool that we got that all on camera. So I wanted to talk now about what happened in my first 2 pregnancies, and I can link some of the bigger videos, the videos that would be important to watch if you're kind of wanting to know exactly what happened, what my history is. I'll link those down below. But just to give you a quick summary, my first pregnancy with my son, that was in 2017. I was diagnosed with preeclampsia around 35 weeks with pretty high blood pressure. They wanted me to go on bed rest, so I did stop working at that point. I was just laying in bed, just trying to get some rest, trying to keep my feet up and just really take care of myself, stay hydrated. I was only a couple days, I think it was like 2 days into being on bed rest, and I started to get a really sharp pain. I think it was in my right side, like kind of up by my ribs, but on this side. And they had told me if you have any just weird pains, just anything that feels unusual, that comes up all of a sudden, go to triage and get it checked out, because there's a lot of complications that can happen towards the end of pregnancy, especially if you already have preeclampsia. You definitely don't want to hesitate. So I had waited all day. The pain was not going away. So I went in, it was like 8:30 at night. I was not going to be able to sleep. I was just so uncomfortable. So we went in, they did a bunch of blood work, and from the blood work, they could very quickly tell that I was developing HELLP syndrome, which is basically like a more advanced version of preeclampsia. Instead of just having protein in your urine and increased blood pressure, you then have other complications which kind of lead to organs not working the way they're supposed to, potentially organ failure, really bad situations. If you don't catch it really quickly, it can be really scary. So luckily I did catch it when it was just first starting to develop. The blood work definitely showed that that's what was going on. So they said, you're 36 weeks now. So I guess I was probably about 35 and a half weeks when I got diagnosed with preeclampsia. But they said, since you're 36 weeks, we really just need to get the baby out now. It's not safe for the baby to stay in any longer. They did about 12 hours of trying to induce me, and I made absolutely no progress. It's my first baby. I was 36 weeks. So they said, let's just move right to C-section. It was not an emergency C-section, but it was we decided an hour ago C-section, not scheduled. So I did have a spinal. I didn't have to be fully put under later. I just had a spinal, did the C-section, was a little nervous about that. It was my first one, but everything went great. And when Dean, my son, came out, he had no issues. He didn't need to go to the NICU at all. Knowing now what we know about him, though, and him being older, I can see that it seems like his lungs aren't as strong as other kids' lungs. He gets croup a lot and just has really bad coughs and just is sick a lot. So I feel like that might have affected his lungs being born a month early, but he was breathing fine when he came out, and they said he didn't need to be in the NICU at all. He did have jaundice a little bit, so we had to go back for about 24 hours to take care of that. But other than that, baby went home, no NICU time. I did not have any issues. As soon as the baby came out, I was fine. No high blood pressure, no issues at all. I did not have to go on medication, so I was super happy about that, but it was still extremely scary. I knew I wanted to have a second kid. I wanted to at least have two, and it was really important to me. So we actually got pregnant pretty quickly after, and I had my daughter about 23 months later, so almost 2 years later. That was in 2019, and I was extremely nervous. After having preeclampsia and HELLP syndrome, I was so scared that I was going to have the same complications, especially HELLP syndrome. I was just really nervous, wanting to get blood work done all the time as much as they would let me. About 32 weeks is when I personally felt like I was starting to develop preeclampsia. My blood pressure was starting to slowly creep up, and they thought, well, maybe you're just super anxious at the doctor. It's not really anything alarming, but I could see it starting to rise every appointment. And I knew that's where we were headed. I had kept such a close eye on it. I would take my blood pressure at home. When I went to the grocery store, I was always checking, and maybe it was a little bit over the top and I shouldn't have been so stressed out, but it's really scary if you're in that situation where you have good reason to think you're going to develop preeclampsia. You're just always on edge. So I was very diligent about saying we need to be checking the protein in my urine. We need to be doing blood work. We can't just hope that it doesn't happen and not be looking for it. My doctor actually told me, my main OB that I was seeing said, I would bet a month of my salary that you're not going to get it again. A lot of people don't get preeclampsia more than once. And I didn't really have any reason to, but I just didn't believe him the whole time. I was like, I don't care what you think is going to happen. I think we need to just be really careful. They actually did a test on me to see what the chances are of me developing preeclampsia based off of an ultrasound and blood work when I was, I think, like 20 weeks, somewhere around there. They said, you have a 1 in 4,000 chance of getting preeclampsia, less than the average person. So stop taking your baby aspirin. I was taking a baby aspirin every day, which is recommended if you have a high risk for preeclampsia. They told me, stop taking that. You're not going to get it this time. And I listened to them. I stopped taking my baby aspirin because I know there's a few little issues that could come up if you take aspirin while you're pregnant. That's why they put you on a baby dose. But I just listened to them and I thought, okay, well, maybe we will be okay. But I was still pretty nervous. So now we get to around 32 weeks when my blood pressure is starting to creep up. And I thought, man, maybe I'm not even going to make it to 36 weeks this time. I just started panicking. But every appointment I went to, my blood pressure was not severe enough to be put on bed rest or have anything drastic done. And they said, we're going to try to get you to 37 weeks. And I just couldn't believe them. Every single appointment, I was like, there's no way I'm going to make it that far. Something's going to happen. And they actually did at one point have me go into triage for monitoring for 24 hours. And they're like, well, your blood pressure isn't too severe, go on home, you're good. And they just kept me going and kept talking me through it, and I was not convinced. But we scheduled a C-section for, I think it was 37 weeks and 2 days, because the weekend we went for that Monday, and I made it to 37 weeks and 2 days without having any issues. I never developed HELLP syndrome, but I did have preeclampsia. I was kind of on the edge, and then they finally were like, okay, we can diagnose you because you have some protein in your urine and your blood pressure is creeping up. So I did get diagnosed with preeclampsia, but no HELLP syndrome. C-section went great. Everything was pretty much acting like the first pregnancy. I didn't have any issues. My baby came out. She could breathe fine. Everything was great. But after about 24 hours in the hospital, they noticed that my daughter was sounding like she was struggling to breathe a little bit. She didn't really sound like that before. And all of a sudden she was sounding a little off. And so they checked her out and noticed she had a small hole in her lungs. I don't remember all of the small details, but I just know that there was a hole in her lungs and they needed to take her to the NICU. I wasn't expecting that because she was 37 weeks. She was farther along than her brother, but this was kind of an unrelated issue to being born a little bit early or because of preeclampsia. It was not related to that at all. It was kind of just luck of the draw, just an unlucky chance that happened. She actually ended up being in the NICU for about 12 days. I did exclusively pump for both of my babies, and I do have videos on how to exclusively pump, what materials you need and all of that, because I did do it for about 3 months with both of them. I really struggle with breastfeeding, but I try at the beginning and then I ultimately will go do exclusively pumping if I need to. So I did that with my daughter in the NICU, stayed up next to her pumping every 2 hours for 12 days, and luckily it was just 12 days and we were able to go home. So we're in the NICU and everything is pretty much going well, but after a few days at the NICU, I noticed my swelling never went down and I was feeling a little off, and I was like, this never happened with my son. All of the swelling went away. I lost like 30 pounds in a day just from swelling after having my son. That was not happening in this case. So I went back to my OB, and I really didn't want to because I had to leave my daughter at a different hospital, go to my OB and say, something seems off, you need to check me. And my blood pressure was high. It never went back down. So they took me back into the hospital, a different hospital than where my daughter was, for 24 hours. I could not see her. I was pumping and keeping the milk to bring back to her. But that was terrible to be away from her for a whole day when she's like 3 days old. They needed to put me on magnesium and really closely monitor me, and they did put me on blood pressure medication. I was on that for about 2 weeks, and then after that I had an appointment and they said, you look great. Let's just stop taking the medication. Never had an issue after that. I go to the doctor now, have my blood pressure checked, no issues. It went back to normal, and really no concerns there for like a long-term need for blood pressure medication. But that brings us to this pregnancy. Now, my daughter's gonna be about 3.5 when this baby is born. So there's a much bigger gap between my second and third than my first and second, which may be helpful, but I'm also a little bit older. I'm 30 now, I'll be 31 when the baby's born. So there's a lot of factors that change over time. Obviously, we would love to have a pregnancy and a baby with no preeclampsia involved, no HELLP syndrome, and that's what I'm hoping for, but there's a lot of doubt in my mind that I can do that, and so I'm trying to be super careful and do everything that I can. I've done a lot more research on what can actually help you avoid complications during pregnancy, just in general, and what diet you should be aiming for. It's not going to be completely possible to eat perfectly every day when you're pregnant, because some days you just don't want to eat what you're supposed to eat, and that's fine. But I've been doing a lot of research, a lot more than I did for the first 2 pregnancies, because I trusted my doctor and I just kind of did whatever they said, but they never really helped with the nutrition portion of it. They really just said baby aspirin is the only option and there's nothing you can do to prevent preeclampsia. I was always told it's not your fault, there's nothing you can do. But doing a lot of research on my own, I feel very differently now. And I encourage you to do your own research. Doctors will tell you some things that are helpful, but I think you should supplement that with your own research and kind of piecing the puzzles together for what makes sense for you. And there's some things that I'm going to do differently this pregnancy to try to give myself the best shot at having a healthy pregnancy, and maybe I could make it to 39 weeks. My OB right now says that's the longest they would let me go, because I've had C-sections and I've had preeclampsia. That would be the longest we would wait to schedule a C-section, but that is possible. So I'm not having any blood pressure issues right now, and that's pretty normal when you're this early in pregnancy. You usually don't see those issues until well into the 3rd trimester. But I did want to talk about maybe some symptoms I'm having, things that are just going on that aren't related to any pregnancy complications, just normal things that happen in the 1st trimester of pregnancy. I was pretty nauseous this time. I never threw up, but it was kind of just constant feeling gross, feeling like I didn't want to eat. If I didn't eat for a while, I would feel even sicker, but I just never really felt like eating. Everything sounded gross, especially protein. And so doing all this research on what's healthy to eat while you're pregnant really was hard for me, because I knew what I should be eating and I just couldn't get there most days. And I know in the 1st trimester, it's not super important to eat everything perfect because the baby's small. You're not trying to keep up with as much nutrition as you are like in the 3rd trimester when the baby's huge and growing and you need all of this. So I know that you can give yourself a little bit of grace in the 1st trimester, and I tried to, but it was just really hard. But I'm feeling a lot better now, and I'm able to eat a lot more things, although I'm definitely not back to normal where I could just eat, whatever I think is a good meal for today. I'm still pretty picky on what I eat, and there are certain things that still don't sound great to me. Meat still doesn't sound that great to me in most situations. So I'm really trying to get in other sources of protein. Other than being nauseous, I really haven't had any other symptoms. I know there are tons of crazy symptoms that people get during pregnancy, but I personally don't get a lot of those. Heartburn, being constipated, I just usually don't get those symptoms. It's usually just a little bit of nausea, and that definitely happened. I think it was probably the worst this time than it has been in my other pregnancies. I try to be careful with how I sleep, starting as early as I can. I try definitely to not lay on my stomach. I still lay on my back sometimes, but I know pretty soon I'm gonna need to stop doing that. I aim to sleep on my side most of the time. And I know there are tons of pregnancy pillows and fancy things that people buy, and I've bought them before, but over time I realized for me, the most comfortable, the easiest thing that you can have anywhere is just extra pillows. I put a pillow between my knees, and I have a pillow like up by my arms, and I put my one arm underneath and one arm on top of the pillow. So I have 3 pillows total. I can use those in a hotel, at home, wherever I am, and that is so comfortable for me. I don't need the fancy giant pregnancy pillow that's like goes by your arms and your legs and it's all connected. I don't need that. So I've been sleeping pretty well, honestly, with that setup, and I'm pretty happy with that. I don't have pregnancy insomnia for the most part. I think I did a few days, like when I first found out I was pregnant, around 4 or 5 weeks, but at this point I'm exhausted all the time. That, I guess, is one other pregnancy symptom that is pretty prominent, is being tired. I take naps now a lot of the time because by like 2, 3, especially if I haven't had coffee, which I haven't really been having much coffee at all, or caffeine in general, I'm exhausted, and I can easily take an hour, 2-hour nap if people in my family will let me. And I've never been somebody who naps generally, so even with other pregnancies, because I was working during the 1st trimester and past pregnancies, I've just never had the opportunity or the desire really to take naps. I've just been on the go, and now that I'm staying at home with the kids and I take them places and we play in the morning and then I'm exhausted in the afternoon, it's definitely been happening pretty frequently. So for this pregnancy, things that I'm going to be doing to try to minimize the risk of complications during this pregnancy, it's mostly focused on nutrition, but I am trying to stay active. I would love to do like bar classes online, just like on YouTube. I do that every once in a while, but I haven't been doing them as frequently because I've just been so tired. I'm hoping I can start getting more into that coming into the 2nd trimester. I'm trying to fit that in more because I know that's really important. Maybe not, go on a 3-mile run or anything, but just moving my body, building a little bit of strength, a little bit of cardio. I feel like that would be really good for me. So I'm trying to do that, although with 2 toddlers, taking them all over the place, I'm definitely still fairly active. But in terms of my nutrition, so from what I have read, the research that I've done, mostly focused on preeclampsia, but also just generally what's good for pregnancy, I found a couple common themes. One, increase your protein. In general, a lot of people, I feel like, don't get enough protein, and you need even more when you're pregnant and when you're breastfeeding. And so it's a struggle for a lot of us to get enough protein. So I'm really trying to focus on that, getting in extra protein wherever I can. And then also adding a lot of salt to my diet, whether that is to my drinks or to my food, or just taking a pinch of salt and eating it when I need to. I typically was afraid of salt. I was told that it wasn't good for me, specifically for blood pressure issues. In some situations, some people do have higher blood pressure when they eat a lot of salt, but it's not very common. Most people benefit from extra salt in their diet, especially if you're not eating out a ton. If you're making a lot of your food at home, you might not be getting enough salt. So I'm trying to add in enough salt because from what I've read and I've seen recently, it might actually decrease my blood pressure during pregnancy, and it's just great for your body to help with hydration. Although that seems very counterintuitive, if you're not taking in minerals when you're hydrating, you're not actually fully hydrating, and I've learned that. And so I'm really trying to focus on the hydration part, as well as the salt and minerals and tons of protein. So that's really where my focus is, trying to make a lot more food at home. A lot of you guys know I am gluten-free now, and that is for thyroid issues, and I don't know if that for me personally is going to help my thyroid, but I know for a lot of people it does help. So that's just why I decided I might as well be gluten-free. I don't think it's gonna hurt me in any way. So that's what I decided to do. It's been about, I think, 8 months that I've been gluten-free. But during that whole process, I tried to take out a lot of sugar and processed foods from my diet and my kids' diet. So I'm definitely maintaining that lifestyle going into pregnancy, which I think is very helpful, but then also adding in those other really important focuses for me, like the salt and the protein and staying hydrated. I have a few other things going on that I've kind of become aware of over the last year. So I do have Hashimoto's, and I am on medication. I was holding off on medication for a while, but as soon as I became pregnant, they said, you know what, getting your TSH low between like a 1 or 2, I think maybe 2 or 3, somewhere in that range is ideal. And I was about a 7. So I did start a low dose of medication to help lower my TSH, and I don't feel really that different. It also could be because pregnancy is kind of counteracting any benefit I would get from that, because I'm super tired and feeling gross all the time. But I think that it is super helpful, at least when you're pregnant, to lower that TSH, because that can increase your risk for complications. I honestly could have had Hashimoto's during my other pregnancies. Nobody ever tested me for that. No one ever checked my thyroid. I went in, it was about a year ago now, and said, do some blood work on me because I'm losing a lot of hair and I just feel like there could be a thyroid issue. My mom had a thyroid issue and my sister does. So I just thought it was time to check. And I discovered I have Hashimoto's, and no one had ever thought to check that before. I feel like during pregnancies, they check for gestational diabetes. I feel like they should check for thyroid issues because it's a big deal and it's common, and medication is very helpful while you're pregnant. So I am doing that. I'll keep you guys updated on any changes to that, but the plan right now is to every month do blood work and slightly increase my medication for my thyroid every month, because your need for the medication increases throughout your pregnancy. That's normal. And then after the pregnancy, it should decrease, or maybe you don't need the medication anymore, but you just kind of have to keep a close eye on that. In addition to my preeclampsia and blood pressure, I'm definitely staying on top of that as well. So that's where I'm at 16 weeks pregnant. Now you guys kind of have the whole spiel. You know where I am. If you are in a similar boat and you are struggling with health issues while you're pregnant, or just trying to be as healthy as you can while you're pregnant, you know it's a lot of work. It feels like a constant struggle to feel good while you're pregnant and get in the right nutrition and feel like you have energy for your family. It's just a lot. Of course, it's even harder when you have 2 kids already versus 1 or none. So it's been a lot of work this time around. But I'm glad I'm able to make these videos so that I have them to look back on and can share them with all of you guys. If you have any questions for me on anything that I've talked about, let me know in the comments down below. I will try to do updates. I'm thinking maybe every month, maybe more frequently if something comes up, but hopefully around every month, and maybe more often towards the end. Things change very quickly for me the last couple months of pregnancy, so there could be a lot of updates coming. I appreciate you guys watching this video. I miss talking to you guys. I hope you're all doing well, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.